Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Women in Leadership Conference at San Diego State University. My name is Neeta Umashankar, and I'm a professor in the marketing department at SDSU. I've been a professor for 12 years, absolutely love my career, and I'm very excited to hear from the panelists in terms of their career trajectories, what impediments they faced, how they overcame those challenges, because the goal today is for all of the students to engage with these panelists, to understand how we can achieve our goals and move up our career aspirations and actually meet those aspirations. So we have an incredible panel today. Thank you all for joining us at SDSC. I really appreciate it. We have Jess DeBolt, who's a senior client partner at Twitter, Nidhi Gai, who's a global head of sales operation at Amazon, Emilia Lukeman, global communications at TikTok, and Jackie Trong, brand marketing partnerships lead at Google. So what I'd like each of you to do, starting with Jess, then Nidhi, Amelia, and Jackie, introduce yourselves, a brief background. And how the panel is going to work is I'm going to pitch a question to one of you. Others can jump onto that question and offer response. You don't have to, but we want this to be an open dialogue and open discussion so that the students can really gain from this. We ask that you limit your responses to about a minute and a half. Students, if you have any questions, just put it in the chat box and we'll make sure that Christy, our student moderator, gets to that during the open Q&A. So Jess, please go ahead and introduce yourself. Thank you.
Hi, thank you, Neeta. It's so nice to meet all of you. Thank you for having us. I am so excited to be here. I am a client partner at Twitter, and I've been at Twitter for about 6 years. So it has been a wild ride. If any of you are on the platform or have a high propensity of following the news, we tend to always be in it, especially over the last year. So it's really awesome. I love my work, what I'm doing right now. I've had multiple roles throughout the last 6 years. What I'm doing right now is based in our LA office in Santa Monica, and I work on our media and entertainment partnerships. So that encompasses Universal Pictures, Focus Features, NBC, a lot of that NBCU umbrella, and then also our shining star right now is HBO Max, which is making a really big splash in the entertainment space. So excited to share that experience. I actually graduated from Santa Clara University, just up the state a little bit, and that was in 2008. And I got my start in PR at Apple, and then I moved to TravelZ, which is a travel deals company, and then I found my way into sales, and that's what we call a client partner.
Thank you, Jess. Nidhi?
Hi, everyone. My name is Nidhi Kai. Nice to meet all of you and so happy to be here today. A little bit about my background. I'm actually born and raised in India. I moved, I did my master's in the UK, lived there for a few years, and then moved to the US in 2006 after I got married. So my career took off after my wedding. I've been at Amazon for 9 years now. My background has again always been in digital advertising and sales. I currently manage a sales organization at Amazon. I also run a product sales org where we drive adoption and participation for different Amazon advertising products. And then the Associate Account Executive Program, which I'm very excited about, where we work with a lot of universities or we teach an Amazon advertising curriculum and then hire a lot of college grads into our Amazon advertising program. So that's a little bit about me.
Thank you, Nidhi. Amelia?
Hi, everyone. My name is Emilia Lukeman. I lead consumer product and brand communications for TikTok in the US. I graduated San Diego State in 2006, which feels like eons ago, but many, many fond memories of the university. What I do at TikTok is I tell stories around how our community uses TikTok. And that includes diverse and unique voices from our Black creator community to our LGBTQ plus community, and also interweaving how they use TikTok, the product, in their storytelling. I've been at TikTok for about 1.5 years, and before that, I spent much of my career at the Walt Disney Company right here in LA.
That's great. Thank you, Amelia. Jackie?
Hi, everyone. It's awesome to be here. I actually went to San Diego State in 2007 through 2011. So it's been 10 years. So it's nice to be back. I actually am now at Google, as Neetha mentioned, and I lead our partnerships for brand marketing across consumer apps. What that really means is a lot of brand partnerships in entertainment and sports with Google Search, Google Maps, and a lot of other products that we have. I've been here for about 2 years, and I spent most of my career actually at Netflix prior, launching a lot of different partnerships throughout the years. Back when they were still delivering DVDs is when I started at the company. So saw a lot of growth there. It was really exciting. And now I'm doing a lot of entertainment partnerships with Google. So I'm happy to be back and speaking to all of you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Jackie. And Jackie, we'll actually start with you. So the question for the group, the panel is, where did you start in terms of your career goals as a college student? Where are you now? And is this the trajectory that you planned for yourself? Has it gone in a better direction, worse direction? If you could give us some insights.
Yeah, definitely. I think when you're in college, a lot of people tell you to think about your 10-year path. And actually, since it's been 10 years, I could have never honestly predicted that I'd be where I am. I didn't even know that partnerships as a job existed, right? I thought there were like big buckets of sales and marketing and creative, and I thought they were all very broad. So when I was in college, I really loved creativity and design, and I thought that I would be in a creative ad agency. And coming out of school, I saw how competitive that was, and it was almost impossible to get a job at an agency. I actually ended up at a creative tech company and a startup in Venice. So I kind of found my way through a lot of different trial and error in terms of job responsibilities, and found my little niche in product marketing and partnerships, and kind of kept developing relationships with a lot of the same tech companies, and found my way through different opportunities. Jess, funny enough, was a good friend of mine in Los Angeles, and her boyfriend at the time, now husband, had introduced me to the person at Netflix who was hiring someone who worked in product marketing and partnership. So it just kind of was when opportunity meets preparedness, as Oprah says. I think I was kind of in a place where I knew what I enjoyed and what I was good at, and just knew about what I was interested in. And so that connection really helped me kind of launch my career and where I am today.
Thank you, Jackie. Anyone else from the panel? Jess, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah. Oh, thanks, Jackie, for the shout out. When you're making it up to the CEO rankings, I want I want a piece of it. Jackie's so amazing. We're lucky to have her, and I'm so grateful that she invited me to this. Yeah, I will say my path when I was a college student, I had I had studied abroad in Australia, and I had just got out of the country for the first time. And I was like really, really excited about traveling. And so I was trying to figure out, do I want to do like travel journalism? At the same time, I had a love for teaching little kids to dance. So I was on the dance team at Santa Clara. And so I was like, do I pursue dance? And then I also loved psych degree. So I did psych and communications. And my psych degree was definitely like research focused, but what I really want to do with that was like become an MFT or get a PsyD. And so really I just was looking at this full menu, and I essentially would like almost like on a monthly basis make a new list of my priorities. What am I most interested in? And what I did was actually shadowed as much as possible to work with a dance teacher. What's it like to have a dance studio, to talk to therapists, and then also even like go through and applying through grad school and seeing if I was ready to do that. So I touched a little bit of everything, and then had a couple PR internships, and one of which was Apple. And I fell in love with tech, and it was so exciting and so fast paced. And I think to Jackie's point, that she joined when Netflix was just a DVDs company, who would have thought? Now we are, most of us are cord cutters. So that's very similar. When I graduated, like Twitter was barely a thing. I think it was like a closed group. There weren't ads on it. When I thought of a salesperson, which is my role now, I thought of not like a strong boss woman. I thought of like a car salesman, and I didn't want to do that. So I've been able to find some mentors through the years, and I feel like that's sort of what has led me down this road. And it wasn't even until like maybe 6 or 7 years ago that I was like, okay, fine, I'll do sales. I love it. Like, fine. I'm the, I'm into it. And I always like to kind of like see what else is out there.
Thank you. Thank you. And this question is for Emilia and Nidhi. Emilia first. Um, I hear from students often, I don't even know what are the possible roles in marketing or in finance. How do you even find out what the potential is for a job? How did you find out? Is it trial and error? Or you ask a mentor like Jess brought up? How did you start?
It was exactly that. Yes. I asked a mentor. I started just doing, expanding upon the curriculum that I went to the School of Communications at San Diego State, but I expanded upon the curriculum, started looking at the companies that we were learning about in class through case studies. So one example was Ketchum PR, a global PR agency that is still in existence today. And that was actually one of the case studies that my professor, Dr. Glenn Broom, was teaching to us about a crisis comms situation that Ketchum had gone through. So what I ended up doing was just looking at various PR organizations locally in San Diego as well as nationally, and just studying their case studies and the types of clients that they had. And from there, just started honestly doing my research and reading to find out like what type of work communications really entailed. Everything from media relations to internal comms to crisis comms to corporate reputation management. And from there, as I entered my junior and senior year of school, I just started out and applying for internships and then building my network from there.
That's great. Thank you. And Nidhi, I wanted to ask you, in addition to this question, in terms of an international perspective, because you've had, India, UK, and the US, how you traversed all of those.
Yeah. Um, a little bit of a different background, but somewhat similar to what everybody said. For me, back in college, I had no career aspirations. I was not focused, like a lot of 18, 19-year-old kids are. We don't know what we want to be, and I think it's totally okay to not know what you want to be at that age. And really explore. My dad always used to tell me, I think you'll make a really great lawyer because you debate very well with me. That's what I thought I'll be when I grow up. Um, I think for me, I did my master's in marketing. I really enjoyed the business aspect of things. I knew that when I was in school and in college, science never interested me. I knew I always wanted to be on the business side of things. But for me, I was very lucky because my mentor was none other than my own husband. So when I got married and I moved to the United States, it was him who would sit with me and talk about the importance of being financially independent, the importance of making a career, importance of um, just going out there, putting your education to use. So everything that Emilia mentioned, my husband would do that for me. He would sit down and make my resume. He would help me apply for roles, and I remember sitting till 2 in the night with him. We'll doing mock interviews. So he helped me a lot in landing my first job. But to be honest, I think when I moved to the US in 2006, I had no idea that you could even make a career in advertising. I didn't know much about the world of advertising at all. Really got into it by fluke. I was just 5 months into the country. I had just barely learned how to drive because driving was very different in India versus driving in the US. And I just wanted to get out of the house. I just wanted to volunteer somewhere. And I started volunteering. And one of their key salesperson in advertising left the organization to get married. And I was like, hey, should I give it a shot? And they gave me like a $25,000 sales quota at that time in a month, and I exceeded it. And then there was no looking back. And I knew this was my career. I was going to make a career in ad sales.
That's really great to hear. A question I think that's on top of everyone's mind as a student right now is, how do you catch that break during COVID-19 when budgets are crashing? How do we make a splash or make a name for ourselves? How can a student even have a shot? So what advice can you give them to give them the confidence to keep trying to apply for internships, even if budgets are closing, that kind of thing? So Emilia, if we could start with you, and then if I could hear from everyone, that would be great.
This is going to sound like a self-serving plug, but make a TikTok. I feel like, there are these unique platforms and channels on, where people can show off their skill sets and their subject, their expertise in certain subject matters. And I think like right now, I too have people in my life who are facing the same kind of obstacles. It's the time of COVID, budgets are kind of cut. Are we hiring for the internships that we would have normally hired? And if not right now, when? I think, I say keep at it. I think like, continue to brush up on your resume, not just like in terms of tactically and updating it, but keep learning so that you can build upon that resume and then find creative ways to show off who you are. And, whether that is a TikTok or a creative way to design your resume, I think those are all, great areas of improvement that you can explore and can easily do from the safety of your home.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you. Anyone else want to add to that, Jess?
Yeah, I'd be happy to add to that. I think you sparked something in me, Amelia, when you mentioned, doing what you can with what you have, right? So even if you don't have a current role or right when you graduate, there are certification opportunities that are really low cost options. Or I think the Twitter one is free. Even you can get like certified on your LinkedIn and Twitter. Google Analytics. I think there's like a Facebook one. Maybe there's a TikTok one too, making sure that like you are armed and ready and know that world so that you're ready and your resume stands out a bit more. And then in addition to that, it's like really hustle on the internships. So I think, the unpaid option could be where you have to start given how competitive and how difficult the landscape is. The other thing that I would recommend, and I hope no one kicks me off the panel, but like travel after COVID, after we're done quarantining. But like if you're, having a lot of momentum, or if you are having a lot of momentum, keep at it and get that job. But if it's, if you're hearing 10 no's, um, I would recommend taking a moment and working on those certifications and traveling the world. Like you kind of have this opportunity, assuming we we get out of the quarantine, right? That's one of my biggest regrets is looking back, as I was so anxious to get a job and to, my parents were such lovely parents. They were like, okay, you graduated, phone bills yours, car payments yours, like everything came on me. So I was very eager to like prove myself and pay my own bills. But I think the traveling piece is something, if you can swing it, and this isn't the right opportunity in the workforce right now, when you come back to the workforce, I will tell you those resumes pop when you can say, oh my gosh, I had this experience in Thailand. I was doing this with an elephant or whatever it is. Like you remember those people when you're interviewing like 10 to 20 people, in a week. They definitely stand out.
It's great. Thank you. Nidhi, go ahead, please.
I was just a little bit, I totally agree with Jess said. I think just a little thing I'd add is that sometimes the importance of professional networking, I think LinkedIn, I mean, I'm not marketing LinkedIn here, but I do think that there is some value there. Students reach out to me sometimes with a LinkedIn request, but the ones that actually stand out to me are not the ones that are just simply sending a request with no subject. It always catches my attention when the student takes a little bit of a time to introduce themselves, tell them what they're interested in, and talk about what they'd like to do in future. You may not have an opportunity there and then, you may not know of something, but those are the people that you tend to remember. And then when something opens up, you can always forward it on to the recruiting team. So I think not being shy and reaching out to people you don't know and making a connection and networking is always a good idea.
Thank you. Jackie?
Yeah, and everyone has such great advice. I wish I heard that too when I was coming out of college. And I think one of the things I want to emphasize is, a lot of students have learned a lot already in school, especially business school. I remember one of the things I was passionate about when I was in school is actually volunteering for different small businesses and nonprofits to just help them with their marketing plans, because I didn't get an internship that I wanted. I needed something to build that experience and that network of like people who actually were working in the real world. So especially right now during a pandemic where so many small businesses are hurting, I'd encourage you to think about, are there ones in your neighborhood or communities that could have a little bit of marketing or business help, or even just an extra hand, and that can go on your resume as some sort of assistant or coordinator to just build your work experience. And it's also a great time to just think about what you're interested and passionate about. And I know a lot of folks give that advice, but it's important because honestly, you could look at the world as a lot of different business opportunities, or you could look at it as like what you want to spend your time doing. And to Jess's point, travel opens up those ideas, right? So I think that's where you want to think about your interests and what companies are actually part of those interest areas, and then find a foot in the door. You know, I think those are great ways to think of ideas of jobs to look at.
Thank you, Jackie. So actually this plays upon Jackie's comment and Nidhi's previous comment, which is not necessarily knowing at 19 or 20 what you want to do, but then having some sense of what you want to do. So how do you balance the two so that they can create an opportunity for themselves, but at the same time give themselves freedom to try different things? What is your advice in that sense? Does anyone want to pitch in for that? How do you balance not knowing versus knowing what you want to do? How do you navigate?
It's so tricky, like even at the stage at my career, like when I'm talking to my higher ups or hiring managers and I see a different part of the company I want to move to for new experience. One of the things that I think was pretty great advice, and I don't know if everyone would agree with this, but to be confident in your decision. So like you are going to have this balance. Like the first job, the second job you get, first and second job aren't going to be great. They're not going to be at amazing companies. Like that's just like at Twitter right now, we barely even have entry level roles. They just don't exist. So I would just like lower your expectations of yourself a bit. You can still hustle and in 3 years get to a great company. But I do think I I think that when you go into interview or whether you're having informational interviews, one of the pieces of one of the pieces of information that I think you should take with you is that you want to be confident in what you want to achieve, not just like, I don't know what I want to do. I might want to do this, or I might want to do this. Like hone in on in that moment, what are you truly confident and passionate about so that you can go into that interview really wanting it versus being like so many other people that's just like, I'm not really sure. I'm still figuring it out. Like figure out what you can, go in, go deep. When you're done with it, move on. You know, like that's all you can do is try different things. That's the only way you'll ever know.
Perfect. Thank you. Someone else want to add to that?
I have kind of a rebuttal to, not really a rebuttal, but I completely agree with you, Jess. And like, I definitely, I myself to this day will take that advice because I think it's very important to hone in on what you want to figure out what that North Star is. But sometimes when you really don't know quite yet what you want, you're trying to balance, what you want to major in or what you want your career to be, but you're not, you still don't have the time to figure that out. I think another approach is also to figure out what you don't want. That way you open yourself up to opportunities, but you know for a fact to be your authentic self, these 3 or 4 things are not things you want to do. For example, I knew I wanted to be in communications. I didn't know exactly what sector within communications, but at least I knew I wanted to be in communications. So it had to be something in comms or marketing. I wasn't going to, sidestep into, any other finance, for example. Like I would never, that would not be part of my journey. So that's another approach as well, which I think like changes as you evolve as a person, because you definitely want to be much more focused as you grow and mature in life. But early on, I think it's okay to say, I don't know, but here are the things that I do know. I don't want X, Y, and Z.
I also think the value of finding mentors early on in your college life. I think I learned it only when I started working in a company. The importance of having mentors because they help you navigate a lot within the company. But I have my nephew who's in college right now, and my number one recommendation to him is go find as many mentors as you can. Who've done the similar courses that you're doing, who are probably placed in some other companies, other professions that are working in different organizations. I think more the merrier. The more people you talk to, the more mentors you have in your life. They can give you a lot of guidance and actually help you shape up where you might want to go. Because it's okay to not know what you want, and we all go through that. Even right now in our careers, I hope everyone's going to agree. There are times when you're like, okay, what should my next move be? What should I be doing next? And we don't know that, and that's where I depend a lot on my mentors to get that advice or to agree to what I'm thinking, my thought process. So I think finding mentors is very, very important.
Thank you, Nidhi. Jackie?
Yeah, I'd echo everyone's comments and advice. I think, honestly, I think about when people say, like, how will I find my perfect job out of college? And like Jess said, your first couple jobs are not going to be your perfect job. It's going to be the right job for right in that moment. And what you have to think about is like what's important to you at that right time. And I remember my first job out of school, I actually had 3 jobs right out of school because I had to pay my student loans back. I had to pay bills. I couldn't just take like a low paying internship. So sometimes it's just about figuring out what's important to you and where you want to spend your time. And I'm still, like everyone mentioned too, like we think about our career development every year, every cycle of performance reviews, right? You think about what you want to do next, even if it's a small what I want to do next within your job, like projects you want to work on and that you don't want to work on. So just take the pressure off yourself to be in that perfect job or perfect company right out of the gate. Just try to focus on some opportunity right in front of you, and honestly trust your gut. It's a very cliche thing, but I've trusted my gut and it's worked out so far. And you learn from your mistakes.
That's great. Thank you. And next, I want to ask each of you about how you make your voice heard, because I think the theme of this conference is, and I see this with some students, is it confidence? Is it aptitude? Is it acumen? I mean, how do you really make your voice heard to have a say in a company or an internship? So Jess, if we could start with you.
I'm just trying to think of like how I make my voice heard. There's something that I think I do a lot with sales when I'm like coming into a big pitch or meeting a new client and pitching an idea that no one has thought of before. And part of that is like making sure that you've sort of warmed everybody up, right? So it's like the meeting before the meeting, or like if I have a big pitch, I'll go to dinner with the client the night before or grab coffee with someone in the room before I go in. So it like helps your nerves. It also helps you get any last minute information. But I think in a similar way, like if you want to be heard, especially today, right? Like you go into a meeting or you get 20 minutes of a virtual chat with someone, wherever you are in that process, like people are texting. There's my daughter could come running in here at any second, or my dog or my husband. So there's just this like really finite moment of like being able to focus someone's time. So I think the pre that I would recommend is like making sure there's an email like or a text like, hey, really excited for our chat tomorrow. Like even like here are the couple things I'm thinking about. I'm so excited to dig in more. Like to have that warm up moment, have the chat, and then have a follow up. I think that's really key. And it's like a thank you. Like thank you so much for your time, because that's so valuable right now. So I think if you want to be heard, set yourself up on both sides, if that makes sense.
It certainly does. And has anyone had the experience where you feel like as a woman, your voice hasn't been heard, or it has been heard, or have you ever faced that where you feel like you've had to pivot because of gender, ethnicity, any other kind of things that are coming up right now? Emilia, have you ever experienced that?
Yes, I was just about to take myself off mute and chime in. Yes, I have experienced that. So early on in my career, I worked in the video game space, and I have experienced moments where clients had initially, leveraged me and the relationships that I had built with the media to set up meetings and dinners and, then essentially pushed me aside because I was a woman, and the video game industry is largely men, or it was largely men back then. It was disheartening. It was disappointing. Would that be okay today? Absolutely not. Would I know today to speak up and say, this is wrong? Certainly. Did I do that when I was younger? No. So yes, I have experienced that. And I think like what I learned from it is that it's okay for me to raise my hand, to raise my voice, and basically express how I feel. And that's what I've done going forward in my career. But if I were to look back on it, I realized, yeah, that was a little bit of a cowardly move on my part. But you know what? I was like in my early 20s.
That makes sense. Anyone else have to experience something like that, or had to do something to make your voice heard? Jackie?
Yeah, I just want to share, like, once when we're back in the office or in a workspace, I actually remember I'm like 5'3", but I look taller sometimes. But in real life, I'm 5'3", and I remember feeling like the youngest person in the room always sat behind everyone, always sat in the row furthest away from the table because they felt like they needed to be there. And because I started like on a working team on a project, had very much a big role in that team, even though I was the youngest, I started feeling like, why should I sit in the back? So I actually started sitting at the table near the conference phone. Having a place at the table physically is really important. And I remember feeling like even just doing that was empowering. And ever since then, like, I want to make sure like the younger folks on my teams or in my organizations don't feel like they have to sit far away. So if there are open seats, like, I welcome folks to just sit at the table, because then you're also more engaged to actually speak up, because you're kind of on the spot sometimes, just physically being more present. And I know that's hard right now during like a virtual setting, but something I've also been trying to do is take myself off mute so that we can like respond and have a dynamic conversation versus a transactional one. So there's little things you'll figure out for yourself, but even physically figuring out something that makes yourself comfortable and a little bit more engaged can help.
Thank you, Jackie. Nidhi or Jess?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think Jackie has a really, really good point. I've practiced that too, and I've felt differently when you're sitting in the back versus taking the front and center seat. Um, I won't lie, there have been moments where you're in a meeting with room full of men, and sometimes men who are a lot more senior than you are, and it can sometimes be intimidating. And you figure out like when should I say what I want to say, but navigating that meetings, yes, have been harder. But I think the way I've overcome it is by preparing myself. And it goes back to what Jess initially said. I spend a lot of time when I know I'm going into meetings where everybody might be more senior, more knowledgeable than I am. Then I spend that extra time preparing myself for that meeting. I read the doc beforehand. I prepare my questions beforehand because I want to make sure that it's not only about speaking up, it's also about making sure when you speak up, you're saying something that's going to be impactful. So that has really helped for me, and I think being more prepared for meetings has really helped me overcome my shyness of saying something in a meeting.
And I agree with all of this. I have one more thing to add too, which I did early on in my career, and now it's just like absolute second nature. But when I would be in a conference or in a meeting setting, or in a chat, I would like write down my questions to keep me engaged. Like, the corporate world can be very dull on that first job. So I would be engaged taking notes, but I would also be writing down my questions. And there's always a moment at the end or during a pause in the conversation where they say, does anybody have any questions? And there's that like 5 minutes of bouncing around. No one really has a questions. And I was always had a question, and it wasn't obnoxious. It was just my way of being like, I think my mom taught this to me. Like, you always want to be, if you're present, you want to have something valuable to say, which goes into the research that Nidhi mentioned and being prepared. But it's also, if you get in the habit of forcing yourself where you're like, I'm going to this meeting, I don't have a choice. I'm going to ask a question. Let me make it a good one, and hopefully other people that are afraid to speak up, maybe other women on either side of you, you can kind of help break the ice there.
Thank you, Jess. And that brings to mind something about a quality that I try to understand from my students, which is confidence. What place does confidence play in your company when you see women come up through the ranks? How important is it? And how do you help encourage confidence or build it in your employees or people that you work with? So Emilia, if we could start with you.
Sure. I think confidence, building up confidence takes time. Some are naturally born with it. Some gain it early on in their formative years. But when I see women at our company and previous companies I've been at, I think it's important to not just be an ally to them, but a sponsor. So when you're in a meeting, rather than just answering the questions or turning to those who are most vocal, find the ones that you can tell want to share something or want to ask that question, and call on them and give them the opportunity to speak, give them the safe space, make them feel safe and comfortable to speak. And sometimes it takes a couple of meetings, but they'll eventually get there. And I think it's important to, if you are going to be that ally and sponsor, to also proactively build a relationship with them, to ensure that they understand, you're there and you have their back, and that is the role that you've chosen to play. And if they welcome it, then you'll continue to do it.
Jackie, how about you?
Yeah, I totally agree with Emilia. Being a sponsor and having people's back is a huge example that you could lead for yourself. But I think also when you're opening up and being vulnerable and showing that you may have things you're working on, or that there are things that you've had to overcome, then a lot of folks actually will message you or contact you personally as well and kind of share that. Because I think when you lead by vulnerability and show that, I think a lot of other women and a lot of other people who may be struggling with something similar actually come out and help kind of build community and belonging around it. I think that's something that I found to be super helpful at Google as well. I think there's a really large group of women at Google who bond together about different elements of being at the company, or even just in their careers or lives. And I think that's important to have, to just not even just to talk about your career development, but just to talk about different life phases. So I think that's something to be helpful to other folks with. And I think just being able to continuously think about strengths of people on your team, whether gender or not, or age or not, self-assurance and giving people more validation of what they're working on and what their strengths are just builds confidence. And confidence comes from just knowing what you're good at and being able to practice it and improve on it.
Thank you. Nidhi or Jess, anything to add to that?
Sure. I think self-confidence, or I should rather say self-doubt. I think women tend to have that a little more, and I think it comes from a place because we want to be perfectionist. We want to do everything so perfect that we also doubt ourselves more. And I do that very many times, and I've seen people on my team do that too. But I think there's a lot of power in words of affirmation, and I think they go a really, really long way. It works with me. I've seen that it works with a lot of other women. They want that confidence instilled in them, and I think that's a strategy that works for me. Every time I'm in self-doubt, when somebody plants those seeds of confidence in me, it helps me, and I've noticed that it helps people around me as well. And I think we should be doing a lot more of that with each other. We don't do that enough. There's a lot of value and power in words.
That's great. Thank you. Another one that I think we have time for one more round, is to ask about failure. How have you dealt with failure? How have you overcome failure? How do you face failure every day in your work and in general? So Jess, if we could start with you.
The story that I can think of is just so early on in my life, but I am I'm okay with failure. I embrace it. I see it as an opportunity to learn and an opportunity to improve. And that sounds so cheesy, but it's really true. Like I you know, I look back even when I was like in middle school, and I was on the 6th grade volleyball team, went out with all my friends to try out for the 7th grade volleyball team and didn't make it. And I was the only person that didn't make it at this really small school. It was so harsh and unnecessary. But I learned, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm 5'2". I'm probably not going to be on the starting lineup of a volleyball team. And I ended up finding other things that I was passionate about. The same goes like in my job right now, when I fail, or I don't get a role somewhere, or I'm so, it's like less self-doubt, but so self-critical. I'm so critical of myself. And failing has it's kind of a way of just kind of getting back up and dusting yourself off. You don't have another option, right? Like there's nowhere to hide. And I think part of my tactic there is just maybe it's even like having your support system and like self-care down. So like if I have a bad day and I come in needing to close this like massive deal or a piece of business, or a relationship that needed to be mended, and it doesn't land well, I still take it personally and it's horrible. But I come home, I know my self-care routine of like yoga, calling a friend, having a glass of wine, and I can kind of like decompress myself. And then another great thing is just like having my husband here, right? Like he's my number one fan. So whenever I come to him with these failures or whatever, these opportunities to learn, he picks me up even before I pick myself up, and he says a lot of times, like, if this were a man, he wouldn't even be thinking about this. Like, men, it's all, and you're a man, you just you just go forward, you might not even listen or learn. And that's a horrible stereotype, but I've seen it in the workplace where women just have a lot more of that perfectionism, and failing is just something that I have gotten really comfortable with. I embrace it.
Love that. I love that. Thank you. Nidhi, how about you?
Lots of failures, and I'm sure I'm going to continue to fail because the more you fail, the more you learn, right? So I totally agree with what Jess said. Um, Early on, I think in my career, so many lessons learned. When I was my first sales job, I think I was so aggressive. I was like just so pushy as a salesperson. I just wanted to close the deal. And I learned a very important lesson there that there's a reason why we have 2 ears and one mouth. I always say that to all the college grads now. There's a reason why you need to listen twice as much as you talk, because I failed at it early on. I failed so many times when I got some email that really made me angry, and I just reacted immediately, just responded to that email because I was like, oh my God. But then you realize, like, step away, drink a glass of water, and then think, get your thoughts together, and then learn to respond. So there are a lot of moments like that. But uh, one, uh, one failure that I always talk about was my first role as a manager. This was 8 years ago, my first management role, and I think one big mistake I made was I always, I was a really strong salesperson. I was doing a really good job. I was hitting all my goals, and that's why I got promoted to a manager. And then I'm like, okay, now I have these, 10, 12 people under me. They should be doing exactly how I did it, and then you're like, okay, your way, you should be doing it my way. And I realized that, thankfully, very quickly, which is why I'm still working and have a career, is that more than your team earning your trust, it is you as a manager, as a leader, you earning the trust of your team and your people, and letting them learn and finding what motivates them to be able to deliver those results. So that was my first failure as a manager, and thankfully, again, I had really great mentors who guided me along the way, and I was able to figure it out. But you fail, you learn, and then you succeed.
Thank you, Nidhi. We have about 2 minutes left. So Amelia and then Jackie to end it. Thank you.
Sure. I just like to echo both what Jess and Nidhi said. I mean, I think you fail and you learn. And I've had many failures and rejections in my career as well. I am in PR, so of course I'm constantly pitching reporters to lock and secure stories. And I can't even tell you how many hundreds of pitches I've been rejected with. So I think like it's just about, it's part of life, it's part of our careers. You fail and you learn from it, and you just get better. Failures help you get better.
Thank you. Thank you, Amelia. Jackie?
Yeah, totally agree. I think failures just give you an opportunity to like own it and take responsibility for maybe something you didn't know well, or that you could be better prepared at, or maybe it wasn't the right fit if it was a rejection from a job. I think, like I applied to Google probably my senior year too, to an entry level rotational program, didn't get in, felt really bad about it. 10 years later, look at me now. I think it's just about looking at what it is that failure was and accepting it, and figuring out if there's something to learn from it. Sometimes failure really just stings, and there's situations that you really did everything you could and it still didn't go your way. But all you can do is just bounce back and just brush yourself off. We're strong, we're super resilient. Women go through things every day that aren't perfect. So it's just another thing to kind of help build that shield and build that strength and move on.
Very wise words from all of you. I cannot thank you enough. This has been an incredible conversation. And now we're to our second part, which is where you're going to interact with students. It's a really exciting part. So thank you for your time. I genuinely appreciate it. I'm going to pass it on to Christine, who's going to interact with students. Thank you.
Hi, and thank you so much. So yes, we've gotten quite a few questions in the chat box, so I'm going to try and ask the ones that you haven't already touched on. So one of the questions was how you prioritize your work-life balance and mental health, especially when you're first starting out in the working world and you're really trying to make that good impression. So whoever wants to start it.
I can
Amelia,
start.
I'll feed it to you. Oh, okay.
Emilia, sorry, were you gonna jump in? Yeah, I would say that when you first start, it's a hustle. It is a hustle, and you're putting in hours that people don't even know about, and that's the only way you're gonna get to the top, in my experience. Like, it's not a clock in. The world that we live in tech, communications, entertainment, like it is not 9 to 5. It's nearly 24/7, and you can still carve out your time. In doing so, like I think places like Twitter and a lot of other companies as well, like encourage vacation. I think the science is out there that like if you get to rest and recoup, you can come back and do even better work and have better ideas. So when you're out of office, my suggestion is like be out of office. And if you're not out of office, especially in those early years, like you're burning the midnight oil. It's going to be a long few years, I think, of really hard work to make sure you're learning as much as you can.
Yeah, I can, and I plus one to that. I completely agree with what Jess said. I think taking time off to recharge and recalibrate is super important. So at the beginning of your career, it is a hustle. You know, you're ambitious, you're excited, you want to be supportive of your teams, of your bosses, but remember that it's important to take care of yourself first, because your health and your mental health is first and foremost, should be your priority. And the other thing I would like to add, based upon my experience from a crazy PR agency, is that it's very easy to get involved in, your day-to-day office life. Your office life becomes your personal life. So I think it's always important to remember to separate friends who are your friends from real life, from before your office life, and then your friends at the office. They can blend very easily, but always remember to try and like carve out some of those swim lanes, so you're not constantly always just talking about work, and you actually have time to like step away and recalibrate.
I totally agree with Amelia. I think like finding your right balance of boundaries around being out of office, and like even just weekends and nights, like figuring out what's important to you to spend time to check out a bit from work is super important. I can echo that. Like it is a hustle your first couple of years, because you really think that you want to be available all the time and that you want to always say yes to everything, but you really have to figure out the balance of where your boundaries should be drawn to take care of yourself. I think therapy is also something I really advocate for. I wish that I probably invested in that sooner in my life, in my earlier 20s. I'm a big advocate for it now. There's also a lot of like lighter therapy tools and mental health therapy tools like Headspace and Calm, which are super amazing for just like little moments to kind of get some headspace actually, and have a mindfulness moment. I think that stuff is actually really important. If you haven't tried it, try it. It's helpful and it goes a long way.
Awesome. Then Nidhi, I'll pass this one to you. In the current workspace, what kind of qualities are you or other employers looking for in candidates? Are they looking for more hard skills, soft skills, creativity, passion, etc.?
Oh, I think a little bit of everything, right? But because there is no hard and fast rule. But when I'm looking to hire individuals, I mean, at Amazon we follow the leadership principles, so those are super important to us. You know, all interviews are based on that. But I'm really looking for passion. I'm really looking for curiosity. Again, you know, I'm looking at a lens from a salesperson and a sales organization. You know, we I truly believe curious people make the best salespeople. So you're always looking like what questions they're asking for. You know, you know, Jess said it very early on, when you're interviewing, like you have to show the passion for the role you're interviewing for, and I think that really organically should come through in your interview loop. So those are some of the things that I look for. outside of the examples that they share about their work or school life.
Awesome. Thank you. If no one wants to add to that one, then I'll start with Amelia this time. What are some challenges that you see among your female colleagues today in the tech world, seeing that this is all of your companies are related to the tech field? Do you see any specific challenges to this industry for females today?
I think females or women have made progress in the tech world in particular. I'll be honest, this is my first tech company. Prior to this, as I mentioned before, I was at the Walt Disney Company. Before that, I was at Nike, and then at various peer. And I would say that from my experience at TikTok, we are a very inclusive company, and we have a lot. I mean, our interim CEO is a woman, and I feel that women have made progress in tech, and particularly at TikTok. I feel like women have as much, if not more, of a voice than our male counterparts. So that doesn't really answer the question more broadly. So maybe my fellow panelists have better takes on that. But from my experience, I definitely think that our women are empowered.
Yeah, I can add to that. I think, especially working from a role I started more in product marketing, which is really focused on working with like software engineers and developers and a lot of product managers. And statistically, there are more men in those roles than women. And sometimes it just creates an environment where, like, for yourself, it feels hard to be feeling like you have a voice. And I don't necessarily feel like my male counterparts did that on purpose or intentionally, but I think more exposure to resources like unconscious bias training or conversations about why women feel a certain way in particular roles and situations really helps men understand why we feel the way that we do in certain positions. And I think the more that everyone's been talking about this topic in terms of gender equity and pay in leadership positions and diversity in general has just opened up a lot more conversation. So it has progressed a lot in 10 years, honestly. But I think there's always a lot of work to do around just understanding what we mean by equity, and having more, just more of a voice as a woman or more responsibilities as a woman in the workplace. It's about figuring out like what the disparities are and figuring out like what you can do to change that for yourself, and not try to just always feel like the weight is on you to figure it out for your whole gender, because that is just a lot of pressure. And so sometimes it's just about like I said, sitting at the table if it's all men, or having comments in a project even though you feel a little bit insecure doing it. Maybe just you doing that opens the door for others. So there have been challenges in my experience, but I would say, like Emilia, like over time, tech has kind of progressed pretty quickly as the topic has become much more hot and relevant these past few years.
And I have one thing to add, in my experience too. Like, it feels at Twitter, it's inclusive. It feels like it's getting better. When you look at our numbers, we're nearly 50-50 in the workforce. But when you look at the leadership and the managers and the executives, their majority, they still are men. So until I see like leadership reflected in the overall workforce, which should be 50-50, we make up half of the workforce. The tweet I saw the other day was actually that of the S&P 500, all of our major companies, right? Less than 5% had female CEOs. So that shows that, like, even though we've come so far in the past few years, and it feels like we're getting there, women and girls out of college and young girls don't see CEO. Like, when you say it, a lot of times it's synonymous with a man, just like when you say like, oh, I have a meeting with the CEO. Oh, what's his name? That's because we're 5%. So I think part of overcoming that, and something that I know our group of women at Twitter are really working hard to do, is just to elevate each other up. So at every single level, when there's a chance to hire someone awesome or to promote or elevate someone's work, we can all do that with each other, right? Just how when Jackie when we joined the call, Jackie's like, Jess helped get me my job. Like had a moment to elevate her, and then she just elevated me on this chat. So I think that's really important, is just help bring each other up, because we still have a lot of work to do.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for sharing. Kind of changing topics a little bit back to earlier. A few of you mentioned that how valuable a global or international experience was on a resume. What specific skills from these experiences have really helped you throughout your career if you partook in one of these experiences?
I can just jump in really quickly. I actually lived in Singapore for a little over a year working with Netflix and kind of helping them launch their Asian market. And I am Vietnamese, but I was born in the US. So I had no exposure to what it actually was like to work in a different country, and let alone Asia, who the content is like so vast in every single subculture in every single country. And something that is valuable about that is that the ability to like work through communication styles, the ability to understand what's important to different audiences and different markets and different socioeconomic classes. That is where like travel helps you expand this, like the aperture that you have of like, maybe I grew up in the Bay Area in California. I thought I knew what it was like to see people in different economic classes. Not until you move to Asia or any other place where you see that people have different values, they have different interests. And as a marketer and in business, that's super important to know and experience, because we create messages for people and we create products for people. So when you have that international experience, it's really valuable to understand that you also might have more empathy and understanding for different cultures. And that's really important in marketing and business.
Totally agree with that. I think just the value of getting exposure to different cultures and international cultures is perspective. It gives you a very different perspective to things. I haven't worked internationally in different places, but for the last 2 years, I hold a global role. So we have teams in Europe, we have teams in China. When you work with them, the communication style, working, according to their time zones, like just figuring out, there's so many processes, and trying to apply a process that's consistent globally. Those things can be very, very complex, and you get to learn a lot about what resonates with that audience, because, as Jackie said, we're building products, we're taking advertising to different customers across the globe. Is it going to resonate? Are we creating the right creative bar? So there is a lot of perspective you gain by either working with international teams or working internationally. I think both are very important.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for answering all of the students' questions today and the panel questions. With that, I'm going to pass it back to Nita to close out.
Well, incredible conversation. We cannot thank you enough on behalf of San Diego State University and the Women in Leadership Conference. Your insights were just inspiring, and I hope that you keep in touch with us, because I think students could really learn a lot from you in the future. So thank you for your time. Thank you for all the attendees, incredible students who are here. I can't see you, but I know you're there. And so we are just so inspired by you joining this fantastic conference, the Osinski family, everyone who's pitching women in business, Janie. So thank you for that. I'm gonna ask Christy to introduce the events for the rest of the day, and then I'll tell you about some stuff tomorrow.
Okay, awesome. Yes, so for the rest of the day at 4:15, there's 2 different workshops happening. One is a work with purpose workshop with a Pura Vida, and then the other is the business launch lessons from 3 diverse founders, a Union Bank workshop. So those will both be happening simultaneously at 4:15, and then Nita will go.
Yes, and then tomorrow we have the NFL coach, Katie Sowers, at 2 p.m. And then at 3 p.m. we have a chat. I need my glasses. Okay. Entertainment and media at 3 p.m. But what I would say about all of this is the conversation that we've had today with these incredible panelists. Let's sit with it. Let's make a plan. Let's talk about it with our peers. let's not just drop it after today, but build on this and pass it on to other students who didn't attend this event, so that we propagate the knowledge that we created today to other women and other people in general. So I hope that you had a great time. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you at the next event.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
Take care, everyone. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.